Hey guys, this is Bunsuke. Welcome back to my channel. So today marks exactly 1 month until JLPT, and so I thought I'd talk a little bit about my experiences taking the test and maybe give you some tips that will help you out in this last month of preparation. Little disclaimer, I don't have much experience taking JLPT. I just took it once 11 years ago. I took it because I had to. The university I was attending demanded that I take the test. And so I took it, I passed, and I really haven't looked back because I don't really like JLPT. I don't think it's a good benchmark for testing your actual Japanese language abilities, but it is useful in the sense that sometimes you need it to get a job or to apply to university or maybe for a visa. So in those cases, you should probably take it. And maybe you just like taking JLPT. Maybe you like their studying materials. So in that case, also just go for it. But for me, I don't really enjoy it. Having said that, these tips are hopefully useful if you're a few weeks out from the exam and you need to do some last minute prep work. But also, another disclaimer, this is based on my own experience. You might have a very different experience. Maybe the test has changed in the past 11 years. So just take whatever you think is useful and just ignore the rest. So first, I need to talk a little bit about the circumstances in which I took the test. So I was applying for Japanese grad school, and this was back in 2010. And I was accepted already, but then afterward they sent me a message saying, oh, we see that you don't have JLPT yet, so you have to take it before entering grad school. And I remember being a bit pissed off because I had already done a year of grad school at the same university. But they said, well, you're enrolling in a different capacity now through a mixed scholarship. So now you have to take the test before you enter. And, this grad school was for Japanese literature studies. And when you're doing grad school aimed at Japanese students about Japanese literature, I think it's not unreasonable to demand of your students that they have at least N1. But yeah, I just thought, why now? Mind you, back then, you couldn't take the test in my native country. I live in Holland. So back then we didn't have JLPT in Holland, and so I had to take the train to Germany to take it. That made things a little bit difficult was that they gave me this information exactly 1 month before the JLPT test was due to take place. And so I basically had to phone up the German branch of JLPT and explain the situation, saying that I have to take N1, otherwise they won't admit me into grad school. And so they were very lenient, and they told me, just send us the money, send us the application. I remember it was something like 25 euros back then. It was very cheap. And so I did, and I was able to do the test, and everything was fine. But one other thing that made things even more complicated, back then, Japanese Amazon wasn't as fast as it is today. The other day, I put in an order, and it was here in, I think, 2.5 days. I don't even think domestic shipping is that fast. So it's very disconcerting to think about the fact that a lot of people probably have to work overtime to make that happen. If you have any alternatives to Amazon Japan, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, back then it would take up to maybe a month for books to arrive from Japan. So I remember receiving the books that I needed to prepare for JLPT maybe 2 days before I left for Germany, and so I only had time on the train to look through the books. But I did have a lot of experience reading because of my background in Japanese literature. And so that's basically what saved me. And the thing that I focused on the most was going through grammar patterns, because these are, of course, very particular to JLPT. Once you've seen them 2 or 3 times, you notice them everywhere, but it's quite difficult to get all of the grammar patterns down just through reading, especially back then when I had only studied Japanese for about 6 years. Now, after 17 years of studying Japanese, I think I have most of them down, but it takes longer if you learn grammar through immersion and through reading. Anyway, I did that on the train. I passed somehow, but going through the test for the first time, I didn't do any mock exams. I didn't have any means or methods to really prepare for the test. I didn't even know what the test would look like. And so based on that experience today, I want to share a few tips. If you only have a few weeks to prepare, and you feel a little bit anxious about taking the test and you feel underprepared, maybe these are a few things that you can keep in mind before going in. What I mentioned earlier, that this is not, in my opinion, a great benchmark for testing your Japanese language abilities. So if you take it and you feel you haven't done well, don't worry, it's not a reflection of your actual skills. It's also not really a reflection of your ability to learn. We all take tests because we want to pass them, but don't worry about it too much if you feel you haven't passed or if you end up not passing. But then maybe some actual tips for the content of the exam. So if you're taking N1, one of the most probably difficult or seemingly insurmountable aspects of the test are that you have to know over 2,000 kanji. If you don't know over 2,000 kanji, I would say in the last few weeks, don't try to cram them all in. If you think you're maybe at 1,200 kanji now or 1,300, 1,500, I wouldn't spend my final month trying to get in all the kanji that I didn't know yet, because that's, I think, over 800 or something that you still have to do. And so that doesn't really work. Also, kanji is a very tiny portion of the exam. You still need to pass it, I think, but kanji readings and stuff like that is only 5 or 6 questions. So don't worry about it too much. Instead, try to be aware of the onpu, so the sound elements of the kanji. So if this is read as ko, then this is also read as ko. If this is read as se, this is also se. And you can see that the sound element or onpu is the same in each set of kanji. Now this doesn't work all of the time, but it's something to be aware of. And if you're aware of it, it might help you guess the reading correctly. JLPT 1 has some tricky readings sometimes that throw you off, but if I were to give you one tip, that would be it. Kind of try to recognize the onpu of the kanji and just guess from there, rather than trying to, learn 800 kanji from scratch. So that was tip 1. Tip 2. I still remember very vividly that the reading section of N1 is very, very long. So I would try to not get too fixated on the first few sections of the exam, kanji and grammar, so that you have enough time for the reading section. This will take the longest probably. And so one of the things that I would do if I had 1 month left to prepare is just to go through nonfiction and fiction text, doesn't really matter, just so that you can get used to reading at a certain speed. You need to have the speed to finish the exam. This is also one of the things that I noticed during my time as proctor during the exams. I noticed that a lot of students weren't able to finish the reading section because it's just so much. And so you'll have to focus on speed. Now, there are a few things that you can keep in mind when reading for speed. One of the things that I think is most important is connecting words like shitagatte and nimo kakawarazu. I think if you have a good grasp of these seemingly inconspicuous words, that will help you understand and grasp the larger structure of the text, and will also help you look for the information you need to answer the questions on the test. So that was tip 2. Now on to tip number 3. For the listening section, if you have a lot of experience listening to, let's say, podcasts in Japanese, dramas in Japanese, or maybe you've lived in Japan and you just talk a lot in Japanese, I don't think the listening section will give you that much grief. I still remember very well that the listening section didn't feel really like a test of your listening abilities. It's more of a test of your focus and attention span, especially after you've just done a 3-hour writing exam. They'll give you another hour of listening, and that really takes the wind out of you. It's very difficult to stay focused, especially because, first of all, the listening section is very slow, so your mind tends to wander, at least mine does, and it's very monotonous. It's not very interesting. It's always about the weather or some kind of meeting that somebody has to prepare. It's very, very tedious. And so this is just an added difficulty. So if I were to give you any tips for preparing for this listening section, it would be to listen to a lot of talk shows or dramas where there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of conversation between people, because a lot of the listening section is just trying to find the answer that is a logical consequence of a certain conversation. And so that's basically the only thing you can do to prepare. One thing you want to avoid during this listening test is to think about the previous question for too long. If you're in your mind going, oh, I'm still playing that conversation in my head, no, just let it go. Immediately let it go, give it your best guess, and just move on. Because that will get in your head, and once the previous conversation is in your head, you won't have the headspace to listen to the next question. So those were my 3 quick tips if you're just a month out from taking the JLPT, especially N1, based purely on my own experiences. If you also have tips for preparing for JLPT, especially in these final weeks before taking the exam, please share them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear how you're preparing. You guys probably have a much better grasp of how to take this test than I do. I just wanted to share some of my own experiences, and hopefully these were helpful. So see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That really helps me out. And see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.